Hello, everyone. I'm Ronald Smith. Welcome to Sacramento Suburban Club's monthly meeting. We have it on second Monday of every month. And tonight, our meeting is with Rachel Herron, and she will discuss revisions, the importance of it, and all the details. Enjoy. Thank you.
Any certain font?
I can change the font instantly, so don't worry about font either. I try to make it consistent throughout the newsletter, but font size, spacing, indents, those are real quick and easy. It's the grammar, punctuation, spelling, information correct, that kind of stuff. I don't have time to check facts and that kind of thing. So this is not a publishing house, it's a quick club newsletter. So, but thank you for all your participation. I hope maybe we'll do this contest one more time and see what happens. I can't afford to keep doing this forever. But since I'm not spending any money anywhere, not going anyplace, I can do it for a while. Any questions? Good. Everybody's going to send me something. Yay. Okay, Ron?
Okay, Jeannie, you have stuff on membership or any other subject that you cover?
Well, I'd like to remind everybody there is a chat available, and Ron, be sure to check yours. We have a new member, Barbara Young. I don't see her on here today yet. And we also have some people who have rejoined, and we'd be sure glad to have Susan come back again. That would be great. So the newsletter, good old newsletter, has a little section in there where you can join the club. I see a couple other visitors that I haven't seen before. So go to the newsletter and join. Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Jeannie. Laura, do you have stuff on speakers?
Yes. We have a fabulous speaker tonight, which I'm super excited about. She'll be joining us late at 7:30. Our next month's speaker has come to preview. Emily, do you want to wave your hand or something?
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, that's Emily. She's a government documents librarian. She's going to give this fabulous presentation, which I have already previewed, on how government documents can help writers, which you would not think would be an exciting topic at all. But the preview I saw was actually very funny. So government documents are not all dry or boring or anything like that. And anyway, we'll do a full write-up that will be in the newsletter so you can read all about it. I am continuing to book speakers that are out of town since we are continuing on Zoom. So we'll probably have another San Francisco speaker for May. And then as we get farther along in the summer, perhaps it's not too optimistic to say that we could be meeting in person again sometime soon. So I'll move back to booking local speakers. Otherwise, our Facebook continues to be good. Our meetup continues to be good. We continue to get new members joining our meetup. I think that's all I'm responsible for. Yep, that's my update.
Thank you. Brittany, are you ready to give on critique groups? Let's see and you got to unmute too.
Yeah, so far I think a couple of groups are still meeting via Zoom, but otherwise I think most people are not really meeting. People haven't gotten back to me too much.
Okay, and also if you're interested in a critique group, Brittany, can you put your email in the chat to all? And
oh, yeah.
You can contact Brittany and get going in a critique group.
Hopefully we'll be able to start meeting again in person sometime in the next few months. I think that'll get a lot of critique groups back up and going.
All right. Okay. Yes, and I know our critique group, we're going to try to meet we're meeting at a park coming up. So we're going to sit in chairs and kind of far apart. We're going to try that. Okay. Gloria, do we have a workshop tonight?
Okay, I do. And about the critique, I mean, not the critique groups, but about the meetings. I was thinking about that today. If enough of us are vaccinated, we can probably start meeting sooner than later, huh?
Yeah, I'm hoping to meet soon. I got to call the church to see how it's going too and see how many people we can have in the room.
Okay. You want me to go ahead?
Yes, go ahead and start the workshop.
Okay. Today's workshop is called Reference and Reality, and it's about online resources. And let's see. We all know about how much information overload there is on the internet. There's no question about it. And sometimes you can't. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So sometimes it's actually overload, and sometimes it's difficult to know what information you might even want or where to go get it. And as a writer, I find myself, even though I'm focusing on fiction, I do find myself very often trying to find information, say, like if I just want, sometimes just I want to know what was the phase of the moon on a particular date in time, or want to know how to spell a word, or anyway, there's a myriad of types of things that just come up in your mind, and you want to give that sense of reality to what you're writing. And so then what happens is you start running through Google or something to find the information you want. So while we're going over, what I did was I compiled the list, and it was published in the newsletter. And while I go through it, we can, if you think of more sites that you are maybe like are your particular favorites that aren't on the list, you could type them into the chat box. Or if you think of a particular type of a site that you've never been able to really zoom in on a good type of that particular type of site, you could also put the question into the chat box. So please feel free to interact in that way. So I'm going to give a real quick rundown of the internet in the first place and how it got to be such a big conjangled mess. Is that it started out as the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency created the internet. It was a prototype for something that the Defense Department wanted for basically for communications purposes. And they wanted basically all their computers to link together. And once they had that prototype going, they released, they built the real version, and then they released the prototype out to literally the world and created, I don't know if that was some kind of intentional, like letting the virus go into the world. I don't know if that's what they had in mind or not. But anyway, and theoretically, the internet was going to be something out there that would have no holds barred, as far as there would be no rules, and there would be no, supposedly no taxation on there, and everything was going to be free information. But anyway, as the information started to move onto the internet, it became, as it morphed and it evolved into what we have today. We have databases, we have reference sites, we have search engines, we have our social media, quite naturally, and we have how-tos and do-it-yourself sites, and it can sometimes be confusing to figure out which one you really, really want. And in particular, it's become increasingly difficult to know which ones to trust. It used to be which one did you want to trust if it would not give your computer a virus, but that's less of a problem anymore as just figuring out which one might have information that's really valid. And a really good example is I used to write articles for howto.com, and I would get assigned articles to write that I knew nothing about them. I would research them on the internet and write these how-to articles for the internet. And that shows you how flimsy can some of the information be. So let's start with search engines. I know Google has become synonymous like Kleenex for search engines. And the thing about Google is that it's so popular that it just trends, and you never know what, I won't say you never know what you're going to get up there, but usually the whole page is the same thing, whatever you Google up. So I want to make sure that people are aware that there are a lot of other search sites. There's Bing, there's Dogpile, there's Yahoo, there's DuckDuckGo, and they change and they turn over. And so when you are looking for just an outright search, you might consider sometimes trying some new search sites sometimes, or if you are doing a search and you seem to get stuck on it, you might seriously consider just moving to another search site. It might bring up something different, because for the most part, they are kind of, they have an algorithm in them that tends to repeat whatever people are clicking on, or repeat whatever people are searching on. And sometimes people think that they're rigging it. They're not exactly rigging it. They're just figuring that if this is what everybody's looking for, let's put that on the first page. And a lot of times that's not what you're looking for. So that's search sites. And then we're going to move on to actual reference sites. And Wikipedia, I want to make sure that everybody understands exactly what it is, because a wiki is something that hasn't really got a true authority behind it. And Wikipedia is exactly what it implies based on that information. Wikipedia is an encyclopedia that was, I don't know what person took responsibility for starting it, but basically, at least for many years, anybody literally who called up Wikipedia would have the option of correcting the information in the Wikipedia. They've kind of refined it a little bit now, so that if there's an article about you, your biography, then that will give you the authority to modify that article. But when you think about it, that's, again, it's this free information concept. And to give you an example of how bad it can be, a lot of academic environments do not accept Wikipedia as a reference source. And some of them might, only in an attempt to be open-minded or something, but the fact of the matter is that a wiki can be really, really helpful. Say like a group like ours, we could put a wiki up there and all the members could contribute to the wiki. That would be different than this Wikipedia that people very, very often go to it and use it as a reference. It's fine if you're just looking up, party information trivia or something like that. You'll probably, very possibly, you'll get the information you want. But even then, it's hard to know how accurate it is. So, a word about government access sites is I highly recommend them. And Laura was saying about next week, it sounds great that we're gonna have somebody who's gonna be talking about them also, because the thing about government access sites is that, number one, if you're looking to do something like file your income tax online, or you're looking for information about COVID resources or something, you really, really want to start at a website that's .gov, because otherwise there are many websites that don't, they'll give you the information you want, but they're reprocessing it. Some of them will actually charge you for the information. Some of them say, like, you might be looking to file an unemployment form, and the site that you get up, if it's not ca.gov, it could very well be a site that's going to charge you to help you file your unemployment form. Or if it's, not irs.gov, they might very well be a site that's going to charge you to help you file your income tax. So always look for that .gov when you are trying to do something interacting with a government source. Sometimes the government source will actually link you to another site, but start at .gov. And then also another really great thing about government sites is that if you're writing something and you want to quote information, anything that's out there on the government site is free domain. You can quote whatever you want. If you want to quote a code, or you want to quote just information or a definition of something, always keep that in mind. Start with the government sites. Apps can come in handy. I personally recommend, whenever possible, if you're on a laptop or a desktop computer, avoid apps. Try to stay with actual websites through the web browser, because you'll get a fuller experience to access the information you're looking for. There are a lot of user manuals online, and in fact, at this point in time, almost anything you have in your house, if you can't find the instruction manual or need to do something, reprogram it or something, and you can't remember how and it's old, you'd be surprised. You should be able to look up the website for GE or whatever company made it. An old remote control, if it lost its program and you want to sync it to your television, you'd be surprised. Just go in there and you'll be able to find it. And just one other word before we go through the table that was published in the newsletter is, whenever you do go to the internet to access information, it's a really easy thing to forget, but always verify either the copyright date or the posting date, especially if it's like a news article or something. It's so easy to see something on the internet and not realize that it's 5 years old. And so you do want to kind of be conscious of that, because stuff doesn't really fall off the internet the way it falls off of other types of resource information. So with that being said, I'm just going to systematically go through the links to online reference sites. And these are some that I compiled that I think are probably the most useful. They're the ones that I find the most useful, and I hope you'll find them useful. And the list that was in the newsletter they have actual links. So you can actually click on them through the newsletter and get there if you've never been to any of them. And the first one was libraries, and the Library of Congress. It's been many years now that they've had their catalog, and everything that they have is online in terms of information access. And I've used it to find locations of rare books that might be stored somewhere in our area. They have an interlibrary loan. I've never tried that, but you can actually get books from other parts of the country. They have a law library. They have copyright information, and they have a library card. They actually have a registration for you to get a library card there. And they have a lot of publishing resources, which is something that's of great interest to people like us who are writers. And then, of course, the Sacramento Public Library, and then the San Francisco Public Library. Both of those libraries have access to all the periodical indexes online. All you need is a library card, and through your library card, you can just log into their websites. If you want to look up information, if you want to find, the New York Times, an article that was in the New York Times 20 years ago, you can probably find that in the periodical index. I don't know anybody in the group well enough to know who does what or how, how much you tend to use some of these reference things, but I highly recommend, even if you're looking for a specific topic, if you have an extra minute, instead of going to Google to look up something like, say, space travel even, if you want, say, an article on Alan Shepard's first flight or something, you might consider going to the periodical index. It's just like the old books, and it's online, and you'll be able to access literally a lot of really a wealth of information. Some of the very, very old articles, it might end up telling you that you have to go to a library and look at the microfilm or something like that, but it's worth a try, and at least you'll know where the information is. So then, let me see here. The reference materials under the heading reference materials, these are really obvious reference materials, and these are the ones that I personally kind of recommend. I know there are so many others out there. I keep a bookmark on Merriam-Webster Dictionary and Thesaurus. I use it constantly. And same thing with Encyclopedia Britannica. Britannica does have a fee if you really want to use the articles without ending up getting all kinds of junk coming up on your screen. And if you want to see whole articles, if it's a short article, you might be able to access it for free. But it's, let me see, I pay $7.99 a month for Encyclopedia Britannica access. And that way, anytime I want to do anything that, or reference anything, like I say, in fiction, a lot of times, if you can really give a sense of reality for the reader if you have facts around the fiction that are accurate. And speaking of facts, I love the Central Intelligence Agency's World Fact Book. I don't know how I found it by accident a few years ago. And it's just the coolest thing, because no matter what country you're interested in, you can go to the CIA Fact Book and you can look up anything about that country, any kind of demographics that'll tell you the history of the country, the languages that are spoken, the religions, give you the population. It'll break the population down by all kinds of different demographics. It tells you so much. It just gives you this systematic detail of any country in the world. It'll show you the flag, it shows it to you on the map, and so on. So I love CIA World Fact Book, and I highly recommend it, and it's free. It's a .gov application. I mean, it's a .gov website. And then Google Maps, I don't particularly use Google Maps personally, only because most laptops and PCs and such come with some map system already pre-installed, and I just use that one. But if you do need to find one on the internet, if you don't have one pre-installed on your device, you can go to Google Maps. It's very, very important when you go to Google Maps that you remember what I said about .gov. Google Maps is not a .gov type of a website, and because of that, you cannot reproduce anything from Google Maps. I mean, you can make a copy to take with you or something, but you can't like copy it and use it in a book or use it in anything that you intend to publish. So be very careful with that. Also, the foreign language translators, there are so many foreign language translators have come into the internet recently, and they're great. But if you just want a really quick translation of something, I recommend the one that this foreign language translation link that I gave you in the newsletter. It links you to the Bing translator, which just brings up a web page. It looks like a search page, and you just type in on one side. It usually recognizes, I don't know if anybody's ever tried it. And let me see if I can, oh, this is better. I couldn't see your faces, and I was talking to the lamp. And so anyway, this is better. Now I can see all your faces. Anyway, so this, the foreign language translators, like I say, a lot of times you just want to throw something into a paragraph and you just want to say, how do you say that in French or something? And it's really, really handy, and it's quick. It's very, very fast. And I've put, like, if I'm writing a letter to someone, I'll even type it up and then put it in the translator, and it's instantaneous. It's also instantaneous. So even as you're typing, the words are translating really fast. So it's a good one. I mean, foreign language translations, you always have to take them with a grain of salt because there are idioms. But other than that, as for time and place, there's all three of these: calendar generator, time and date, and moon phases. They're all actually the same website, and it's got a lot more information on it too. And like I said, sometimes, you know, I just want to say, oh, the full moon was doing this, you know, or I'm trying to find out what day of the week something happened on that I want to write about. And I really want to put it on a day of the week in a particular year. So you can set up any calendar that you want and call out a calendar for any year. You can call out not just the calendar for any year, but you can call it out in any country. So you can say, like, I want the Chinese calendar for 2001, or the Australian calendar for 1995. I mean, you can just call out whatever you want.
Hey, Gloria, you want to wrap it up here?
Sure.
So we can get going?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got left down there is just miscellaneous ones. There's a random face generator for you to grab if you need a character and you just don't know, you don't know what you want the character to look like. It'll actually generate faces. There's a random location generator, does the same thing. Grammarly, and then Project Gutenberg gives you stuff that's in the public domain. So that's the whole list. And I'm sorry that I couldn't see your faces while I was talking, because I have no idea how badly did I bore you this time. But anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. And if you, next time we're going to talk about point of view and voice. And if you have any more suggestions for websites that you would like to see added to the list, put them in the chat and I'll add them to the list, and I'll email everybody a fresh list. And that's about it. And thanks for staring at me.
Thanks, Gloria. Yeah, you have some good stuff in there. Also, if you want to, I encourage everyone to try to do a workshop, a little 10-minute workshop. Gloria, could you put your email in the chat to everyone? Put it to
Sure.
everyone, and just email Gloria so she can get you lined up for a workshop. It could be any month you want. And okay, before we get started with the guest speaker, is there anyone first time coming up to the, or on the first? I can't blame the beer. First time here at our meeting tonight that I missed. Is there anyone? You would have to unmute yourself. If there's nobody new, okay. Laura, you want to introduce our guest speaker?
Yeah. Ron, while we're at it, could you please make her a co-host so she can share her screen?
Man,
Because she has some PowerPoint slides.
okay, yeah, co-host. Let's.
Fabulous. Okay, while you're doing that.
I got to remember how to do this. I don't know why I'm forgetting this stuff. I
Well,
couldn't figure out how to do the recording.
If you, Ron, if you hover over my face and pull down the 3 dots, it'll be in there.
Pull down the
let's make sure we get this all worked out.
Oh, okay, I see. I see how to do it. Okay, good, good. I gotta.
It's all good too. I don't need to share the screen just yet. We have time.
Well, you can share.
Hey, there we go.
Got me. Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully everybody read the newsletter, as Mary Lou has tried to prompt us to do by offering us raffle prizes, which I won tonight. Go me.
Bribery always works.
It does work. Yeah, it used to be candy, but now you've upped it to actual gift cards. So awesome. If you read our newsletter, you'll know that Rachel has written more than 24 books, thrillers, mainstream fiction, feminist romance, memoir, nonfiction. I got a couple of her books from Sacramento Public Library. So we have, unless there's more than one writer called Rachel Heron, but I mean, what are the odds, right? So I really hope these are yours. This is a woman's fiction, kind of like a family fiction paperback. Pack Up the Moon. And here is Splinters of Light. It's like another woman's fiction, sister, family story. Here we have a memoir about knitting, A Life in Stitches. Really cute little series of essays here. And then the most recent book that I know of, the 2019 thriller, Stolen Things, which I read, and you know, a lot of current trends like the Blue Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter. I think it also draws on personal experience from working as a 911 dispatcher, which I want to hear more about because I had no idea it was so complicated, like you could get fired for walking off a shift and all this stuff. But anyway, this Rachel is another one of our out of town speakers coming to us from the Bay Area through the magic of Zoom. So we've really been able to expand our speaking repertoire because of the COVID. So let's all focus on the positive here. I usually like to let speakers kind of talk about their own background. So I think I'll stop now and let her kind of give her own introduction.
Well,
good?
Yes, thank you for having me, Laura. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me, everyone. It's really nice to see you and to be with new people. You know, like when I go to the grocery store, I can't see anybody's smiles or their faces. So thank you for not wearing a mask right now, if you're safe to do so. I hope everybody's in the process of getting their shots and their vaccines. That'll be great. I am so thrilled to be here. I live over in Oakland, but I have a very fond spot in my heart for Sacramento. I think it's a really, really beautiful town, and I've got a bunch of friends who live there. So Laura and I met at, it was RWA, right? Yeah, it's nice to see you again. And my friend is R.L. Merrill, who spoke to you recently. So that's how my name got passed around. Like Laura said, I'm a full-time writer. I have done this gig now for the last 5 years. I was able to quit my day job, which was a day-night job. I was a 911 dispatcher for 17 years. I worked first in police, and then I moved out of police and just went into fire medical, which is really where my heart was. And I lived in the fire station. I worked 48-hour shifts, which was great for a writer, because I'd work 48 hours on and then I'd have 4 days off, which is a great time to write. Plus, after I got my Master of Fine Arts in creative writing, I did not want to take a job that required writing, that did a lot with writing. Like I saw my friends going into teaching and technical writing, and I saw that they weren't doing their own writing. So I went into 911 first because it paid a lot more than teaching. And second, because I had this theory that answering 911 would give me a really particular window into the human condition. And I was right. I got a lifetime's worth of story ideas just from answering 911. But overall, I learned that love and fear and hate, but mostly love, all sounds alike in the moment of the beginning of the most stressful day of your life. So I was really happy to be able to do that. But for the last 10 years of my career at 911, I was also working full time. So I worked a lot of overtime. I worked 50 to 60 to 70 hours a week at 911. And then I was working 20 to 30 hours a week writing books. We're going to talk just a little bit about revision tonight, because I'm passionate about revision. And there's a reason that I'm passionate about revision. So I got my MFA. I started dispatching, and then I proceeded to spend 7 years not finishing books. I would start a book, put it down, start a book, put it down. I wrote a 500-page book that I don't even think got to the inciting incident. I think it was a character sketch. It never ended. And then in 2006, my sister told me about National Novel Writing Month. Can I see a show of hands of people who have done NaNoWriMo? Oh, more than a few of you. So National Novel Writing Month is fantastic. It's in the month of November every year. It was started by a local Bay Area guy. And now every year, more than 500,000 people around the world write a novel in the month of November. The novel only has to be 50,000 words. So it's a nice short Hemingway length novel. And my sister told me about this challenge. And I was a highly literary writer, trained in literary technique. And I proceeded to tell my sister really snottily that I would never stoop to trying to write a book in 30 days. And then of course I was wrong, because I wasn't finishing books. As soon as she left my house, I Googled it and I joined it. So in 2006, I spent a month writing a novel. And I knew that it was some of the worst writing I'd ever done because it was so fast. But I also knew that it was some of the best writing I'd ever done because it was so fast, because I was able to get out of my inner editor's way and actually write the end on a book for the first time in my life. It was the end of a crappy book, but I had been trying to write a good book for so long and not succeeding. I hadn't learned that the vast majority of writers must write a crappy book first and then revise it. There's only one exception to this. If you are a perfectionist, like most of us are, I am one, and believe that you have to kind of, write your way through a book and make it perfect as you go, going back to chapters and fixing them, and then before you can move on, that's your method only if you are completing good books that you're proud of. If you're not completing good books, then you're just like the rest of us and you need to write a crappy first draft, which is what I did for NaNoWriMo. So I put that NaNoWriMo book away, didn't think about it for a few months, but I pulled it out about 8 or 9 months later, and I expected not to be able to salvage it. And it was totally salvageable. I made it longer. I think by the time I started submitting to agents, I think it was about 90,000 words. And I didn't know what I was doing revision wise, but I made a good enough book. I got an agent who sold it, and it was kind of the fairy tale dream come true. She sold it in a 3-book auction to HarperCollins, and which was fantastic, right? This book is going to be published. And I did a lot of revision with my editor's help after she bought the book. But then I had a book due in 6 months. So I'd had a couple of years to write this first book, you know, the 1 month that I spent on it. And then I spent a lot of time finishing it and then working on it with my agent and then working on it with my editor at HarperCollins. And then I had a book due 6 months later and I didn't know how to write a book. I did not. I have an MFA, but I graduated with that master's without understanding story structure, basic story structure. We didn't cover that. We didn't cover character arc. We didn't cover revision of a novel length or memoir length project. We just didn't cover a lot. We covered how to write beautiful sentences, but that's not enough when we're actually working writers. So I wrote a book in 6 months. I turned it into my editor and she called me. I was at the day job. I answered the phone, went outside to talk to her. And she said to me, Rachel, I love your characters. Your writing's great. Dialogue's fantastic. Unfortunately, you have no plot. And I was like, really? I don't? She said, yeah, there's no plot. There's no conflict. And I said to her, well, do you think I can fix it? And I'm an A student. I was expecting her to say, oh, yeah, you know, I'll give you a couple more months. You can fix it. But she didn't say that. She said, I don't know. It'll be a lot of heavy lifting. So I panicked, absolutely panicked. I took myself away to the coast, got a room in a hostel over in Pescadero at this lighthouse. And I spent 2 days in the hostel Googling how to write a novel and how to revise a novel. I had this crash course on learning story structure and revision. And the reason I'm so passionate about revision now is I believe it is the time that we get to be the most creative. This is when we really get to use our brains and our creative spirit. I think that the first draft is a lot like skiing downhill if you're not a very good skier. You're just kind of falling, tumbling. It's all going by really quickly. Don't really have a control of what's going on. But revision is really for us perfectionists. And it's really for us control freaks, because that's when we get to institute our structure and our form onto novels. And now I think I'm writing my 28th book right now. And like Laura said, 5 genres, and thanks. And it's amazing. And revision is still my favorite part of the process. And it scares a lot of writers because a lot of us aren't told how to do it. So I'm going to give you maybe my, I don't know how many minutes we'll take for this, but it's going to be a really short blast overview of my revision system. This is something that I teach in a semester. So we're going to do it really, really quickly here. And I speak like this all the time. I'm actually trying to speak slowly. I don't drink caffeine. I'm just naturally a very quick speaker. So please, if you don't understand something I say, drop a note in the chat. I usually have a good eye on the chat. Also, I will drop in right now into the chat. This is a Google Doc link. If you want to put your email in there, I will send you the PowerPoint PDF of these slides. I would bring up all the slides and show them to you, but on Zoom, PowerPoint is hard to read, especially if you're on like a laptop. So I'm just going to be basically covering these things mostly with just my voice without the PowerPoint. But if you'd like the slides as a reminder later, go ahead and leave your email in there. So let me bring up my notes here and let's talk about revision. So here's something I wish that somebody had told me early on. I think that writing itself, first drafting, is kind of this magical, mystical experience. It always freaks me out. I much prefer revision, as I've made very clear. But every book is completely different when you're first drafting. Some books are gifts and they just flow out of your fingertips and you barely have to revise them at all. And some books are beasts. And the book I just turned in is called Hush Little Baby. It's well, I guess I turned it in a few months ago. It's coming out in 2 months in hardcover from Penguin. And it ended up being 100,000 words. And there are 110,000 words in the trash that weren't used in the book. So I wrote basically 2 books to write this book, and that was all in the course of revision. But that's what I had to do to find this particular book. And I don't mind doing that because I got to the book that I wanted to have. So the first draft of every book is different and wacky and unpredictable. However, revision isn't. Revision is a learnable process with a set of tools that if you pick them up, if you have these tools in your toolbox, you can get out the toolbox whenever you need to revise anything. I use these tools for essays, for nonfiction, for memoir, for novels. I use it for absolutely everything. And it's learnable. So a little bit about what revision is and what it isn't. Revision is always essential. Always, always, always essential. And I think that all of you are pro enough to know that. None of us are gods who can just write one draft of something and it comes out perfectly. It just doesn't happen for anyone. I also believe that revision is the most creative fun that you can have while writing. I really, really do. Revision is not impossible. And it is not a one and done cure-all. You don't open up your book at page 1 and revise it to page 350 and then you turn it into your editor or your agent. That just doesn't happen. The first revision is very helpful, but you're going to need to do more than just a second draft. So we're going to talk about those different kinds of drafts tonight. So there's a difference between revision and self-editing. And newer writers often get the two confused. They believe that revision is self-editing, where they go through the manuscript and look for typos and make sentences stronger, make things sound better. That's not revision. Revision is taking your book apart in order to put it back together in the best structure that can possibly be. It's big stuff. It's moving big chunks around. It's identifying holes in your book that you never even thought to write, that now you have to first draft and then put into the book. It's the big, heavy lifting. It's so cool. And so I'm going to give you a few tools. And I will remind you that you do need to do the revision by yourself. You need to do the self-editing by yourself, but every single one of you, when you finish the book that you want to publish, either traditionally published or self-published, both are incredibly viable methods right now. I do both, depending on which genre I'm writing in. You will work with an editor. You will get to a point where you have to work with an editor. It will either be at a publishing house where your agent sells your book to, or you will hire an editor if you're self-publishing and they will help you. So you will end up working with an editor who will be so smart and so helpful. Editors are the best. They know everything. And I generally take about 98% of their advice because no matter what, they know more than I do. They're professional in this particular land of writing. But the vast majority of revision is done alone, sweating it out at your desk. So anything that we can use to make it a little bit easier is awesome. So here's my rapid fire overview of the tools I use for revising an entire book. First, I do what is called a sentence outline. You may have heard this called a reverse outline. That's kind of a terminology that confuses me. Like with all writing and all people who teach writing, we all call these things different things. But for me, a sentence outline is simply where you print out your manuscript or you look at it on an iPad, some kind of new way of looking at it. So you're not just looking at it in your Google Doc or Word document on your computer. Look at it in a different way, print it out, and then you skim your book. You don't read your book because then you will start making those little edits. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Oh, am I using the comma right here? I could make this sentence a little bit stronger. We're not doing that yet. We have to skim our books to remind ourselves of what we wrote. And when we're doing the sentence outline, what I do is you put a few words for each scene that is in the book. And those few words tell me what happened in that scene. They wouldn't tell anybody else. Anybody else could read my sentence outline and have no idea what this book is about, but they're enough of a mind jog to help me be able to remember what is in that scene. So it'll say, Susan goes to the store and meets Steve. And then another bullet point in my sentence outline might be, car explodes. I put them all in the order in which they appear in the book. So now I have the book in little tiny words. Every single scene is there. What that gives you is the ability to read your whole book in 45 seconds, 60 seconds, and remind yourself of what is in there. What you don't want to do, again, while you're skimming your manuscript, is making any changes. You may have found this before. If you have printed out a manuscript and it's the whole book and you start writing notes in it, like, oh, I've got this idea. I'm going to write this idea in the manuscript. Then you turn the page and now you have an idea somewhere in 350 pages of paper, and you're not exactly sure where that is. So I advocate not writing in the manuscript, but I would like to welcome you to the Church of Post-its. I have Post-its usually on my person at all times. I believe in the beauty and sanctity of the 3M Post-it. Original Post-its got to be the real thing, because the other ones don't stick. Don't get them from the dollar store. Trust me. So what I do is, while I'm doing two things at the same time. I'm making my sentence outline. I'm skimming and just getting those few words of everything that happens in each scene. And whenever I have a great idea, I write a Post-it. I do not write it in the manuscript, because then it's going to get lost. But I write it in a Post-it, and I will actually show you. I'm in the middle of a revision right now. You can stick those Post-its wherever you want, but I tend to use just a journal, and I'll just have pages and pages of these Post-its. Every single one of these little Post-its. The reason I like a little Post-it is that on a little Post-it, you can have a tiny idea, like make Paul's eyes green. Great, that goes on a Post-it. But on a tiny Post-it, you can also have an immense, huge idea, like she doesn't have a sister. She can't have a sister. The sister that you wrote into the entire book is not going to work for you. You have this idea, maybe I should take the sister out. That fits on a Post-it too. So at the same time, you're collecting all these ideas, big and small. You can color coordinate them. You can decide that this person's going to have red, this person's going to have green. I don't. I'm always just using the Post-it that is closest at hand when I'm panicked and having a great idea. So colors don't mean anything to me, but I know a lot of writers who do use colors that way. Then what you're going to do after you have these two incredible tools, you have your sentence outline and you have a whole whack of Post-its with all of these brilliant ideas that you've had while skimming your book. You combine the two. You go back to the sentence outline and you start to scribble on it. Basically, I usually print out my sentence outline with lots of room to write on. I wonder if I have one close by. I do not. Sorry about that. But I start to scribble ideas from those Post-its onto my sentence outline. So now my sentence outline is no longer really an outline. It becomes my map for revision. Because with the sentence outline, I can ask myself, do I like my hook? Do I like the way I get into this book, or do I want to change it? I'll ask myself, where is my inciting incident? I circle my inciting incident. Where is my context shifting midpoint? There it is. There's my midpoint. Everything changes at the midpoint, or a lot of stuff changes at the midpoint, but it's not really at the midpoint. What do I need to add to push this closer to about the 50% mark, where a natural turn often happens in classical Western 3-act story structure? I'll circle my dark moment. Where is my all is lost moment? Maybe, and this happens, I forgot to write it. Maybe I forgot to actually change my character. Our main characters have to change in our books, right? In a first draft, I often forget to do that. In a first draft, when I'm making those Post-it ideas, I will often have a Post-it that says, Quincy, character arc, ? Because I hadn't thought to give Quincy, one of my main characters, a good enough, strong enough character arc. So when I'm looking at the sentence outline, I'm scribbling all over it, making these ideas, filling in things that I see are missing, because you can see that when you're looking at your sentence outline. I'm cutting things. A lot of times what I do is I'll see 4 scenes in a row that are kind of doing the same thing with these characters, and I'll just draw a circle around all of them and tell myself, smash. And when I'm at that point in revision, I'll smush them all together and do something with it. So all of my brilliant ideas are happening on the sentence outline map and not in my document. I'm making a plan for getting into the document. So now you have a plan, you have a map, you have a plan for this book and what you actually want it to be. What I advocate for, even though people write their books in all kinds of different order, a lot of people are not linear writers. They write from the middle and then the beginning and then the end. That works great for a first draft. Most people do better when they're revising a book to do it linearly. So start at the beginning of the book and work your way through to the end. This is what I call, so this is your second draft, right? This is what I call the makes sense draft. You're not trying to make it beautiful or gorgeous writing or lyrical yet. And the reason for that is you're still going to have some great ideas. And you may identify with this. The more time you spend making a scene fantastic, the less ability you have to see it objectively. The less ability you have to understand, oh, that scene doesn't belong in this book. I've had scenes that I've loved so much that I have shoved into different places in the book 8 different times just to try to get it to stay in the book until finally an editor will say, Rachel, this doesn't fit. But I couldn't see it because I made it beautiful too early, which is yet another argument for writing quickly. So you start at the beginning of your book. You look at that, you look at your hook. Does it do what you want it to do? If it does, great, move on to chapter 2, following your sentence outline. What will happen is just like what happens to a lot of us in the first draft, is that in chapter, say 5, we are following our sentence outline map. Our book seems pretty solid up till chapter 5. And then you have a new idea. Oh God, back in chapter 2, I should have had the house burn down, not explode in a propane explosion, because these things happen. But if you stop there and go back and fix it, you're going to get caught in that loop, that eternal loop of going to chapter 5 and then revising chapter 2, squeaking into chapter 6, and then, oh God, but chapter 1 should really be better. I'm going to go back and fix that. Yeah. So to fix this problem, this is what we do. We start at the beginning. We're editing our way through. We're revising our way through. As soon as we have a great idea, guess what you do? You make a Post-it. You make another Post-it for draft 3. The makes sense draft, the second draft, takes a long time. And it is such hard work. It is the hardest work you're going to be doing on the book, period. You'll never work harder on your book than you do in the make sense draft. However, when you get to draft 3, you really know what this book is, and you can fly through draft 3 doing exactly the same thing with a new sentence outline. You're pulling in these Post-its of ideas you've had. And the reason we do this is if you get to the dark moment, you're 75, 80% of the way through the book, and you realize that she should have had an evil twin this whole time, and you stop and you go back and you write the evil twin in all the way. You just like wound her in. Now she's great. She's this evil twin. She's there. She's on the page. And then you finish writing the dark moment and you realize, oh no, the evil twin was a really bad idea. Now you have to go and take everything out and undo all of that work you spent weeks putting into your manuscript. If you just keep the Post-it. Here is how I do it when I'm actually inside, like I'm arms deep inside my manuscript doing this, and I have the evil twin idea. Not only do I make the Post-it for draft 3, but I also write, you can do this in any way you want, but I write in all caps in my draft, she now has an evil twin sister. And I revise forward from that 75% mark or wherever I am. I revise forward as if the book behind me is perfect, as if every idea that I have come up with is already implemented. And then I finish the book. That means that now I only have to catch up to where I was to put that evil twin sister in if she deserves to stay there. I've got all of these other ideas. Every time I have a new idea, I keep moving forward as if the first part of the book was done and perfect. And the combination of the Post-it and that note to yourself inside the manuscript. Here is where I decided that my main character is not a man, but a woman. These are big changes that can happen. And then you write forward as if your main character is a man, and you're going to fix it when you go back to the first part of the book in draft 3. So in your third draft, you're going to redo that sentence outline really quickly, but now you really know your book. You're going to do those post-its again, and then you're going to revise again. A lot of people can do this third draft in less than half the time than the second draft. Some people can do it in 3 weeks because you really know what the story is. And then if you're comfortable with where your book is, after that big makes sense draft, and then the smaller third revision, then I like to do what I call passes. And they are for your weaknesses. And I'm just gonna, this is something that is actually legible on, if I share my screen here, if I say play, how do I do this? Play from current slide, there we go. Some passes that people, there are a bajillion passes that you could choose to do. My dialogue is pretty strong. It's one of those things I'm naturally strong at, so I don't usually do a dialogue pass. However, character descriptions, I have never described a character the first time I have met a character because I forget to. I don't have a good visual brain. I don't see images very clearly in my head, so it's very hard for me to see characters. And that is a pass that I'll do. I don't really know what these characters look like until I do the character description pass. And I must say, thank you for the presentation that I heard. I had never heard of the random face generator, and I quickly looked that up. That is really cool. You can bring up faces of people that don't really exist, but then you can steal them and describe them for your books. So when I'm doing a pass for character description, I'm starting at the front of my book and I'm going to the very end of my book, looking at every scene to see if there's a new character that I need to describe. I'm of the school, I learned this from Eloisa James. If you introduce a character and describe them very clearly and very vividly in 1 or 2 sentences, then you can forget about it for the rest of the book. People will remember that that guy was built like a bowling ball wearing penguin shoes. When that character comes back on the page, your reader will remember that. So I do that for character descriptions. Adding visceral emotion is a great pass. Setting and world building. If you're a high fantasy author, I bet that your world building has already been very, very clear since the first draft. However, I write contemporary and my world building is really weak until I go back and add it into a pass. Character voices, thematic lens, pacing issues. These are all things, basically you look at your weaknesses, and this is the beautiful thing, is that you don't worry about them in drafts 1 through 3. I don't worry about scene transitions. This is one of mine. Scene transition. I don't know how to transition a scene if I don't know that scene is going to earn its place in the book. Why bother making a beautiful transition when I may take that scene all the way out? So scene transitions is a pass that I do. I can do it in an hour or 2, just looking at the end of every scene and the beginning of the next one. How do they move together? They move well. Okay, move on to the next one. So this is particularly tailored for your weaknesses. And then the very last pass, this is my favorite pass. This is when you get to make the sentences beautiful. They get to sing. They finally earned their place in this book. And of course, you've been doing your little tweaks as you go through. You can't not adjust sentences and make them better and clearer. But this is the point at which this is my favorite pass of all. You get to really sink into each scene and look at every sentence and say, is this strong? Am I doing enough? Do I need all of these words? Can I get rid of some? I always try to contract words, get into scenes as late as possible and out as early as possible, just to tighten everything. So that's the most enjoyable pass to me. Deep breath. You're not done yet, however. Your revision is over. Your revision is now done. But now we talk about the self-edit, which includes copy edits, proofing, and sentence tightening. It's not revision. That's the higher level, but it's still pretty essential. And like I said at the beginning, this is surprising to many when a lot of writers, especially new writers, think about revision, they're thinking about self-editing. When you are working with when you know how much editing your work needs, you can start to adjust whether you're going to do more or less, knowing how, who your copy editor is going to be, how they're going to support you in terms of comma usage. But you still want to do a lot of this yourself. So what do? There are a couple of tools that we can use. Hearing your work read out loud is one of these magical futuristic things that we get to do now. Every computer will read your work to you. On the Mac, I think you can set a hotkey. So your hotkey will not be this, but if I select any text on my computer and I hit Option Z, it starts to read to me. You get to pick the pace that it reads to you, and you will hear so many typos while it is reading to you. So that's really useful. Another trick I like is to edit backwards, is to actually go to the end of the book, read the last paragraph, read the one before it, all the way to the beginning. You're going to catch a lot of problems because your brain isn't filling in the story. You're actually looking at what is on the page. This is an interesting one, this third one, the 10% solution. It's by Ken Rand. He's no longer with us. It's got a terrible cover. And honestly, they have improved the cover since I first bought it. It's a tiny book. And it is about tightening your prose. And he has these really specific suggestions about tightening your prose. This is one of the very last things you do. It takes a while to do, but you're going to analyze each instance of passive voice. We have to use passive voice sometimes. We really do, but we do want to reduce as much as we can. It's going to make you look at all the adverbs. We also need adverbs. I am not anti-adverb, but sometimes we can do stronger things with our work. So this tiny little book is fantastic, and it will take your writing to the next very, very clean, readable, legible place. Let's see. A couple of things that I recommend are to take a lot of breaks, at least every 30 minutes. Your eyes get tired. Even if you just take a break to walk and get yourself another cup of tea and then come back. We have to remind our brains that they are attached to a body, because writers are really bad at remembering that. I believe that I am just a brain and nothing else, which is why when I get up from my chair, I can hardly move if I have not been consciously making myself move around. Be okay with the fact that you will miss things, and so will your editor, and so will your copy editor, and so will your proofreader. I don't think there's ever been a book that went to press that didn't have a typo in it, or 5. And that is after 5 or 6 editors have looked at it. So we just kind of get okay with that. This is my last thing that I do before I send it to my agent or my editor. I really, really like to send it to another device. I really like sending it. I used to send it to my Kindle all the time, but I recently got this little iPad that I put in a comp book notebook cover. But this little iPad has been fantastic because you can send your manuscript to this and use the pencil to catch the typos that you will see while you lie in bed and read it one last time. This last pass, I usually do it in bed because it's fun, and it takes 5 or 6 hours, and you read your book from beginning to end as a reader would read your book. And it's, number 1, exciting. Number 2, super enjoyable. And number 3, oh my gosh, the typos that you have never seen. Even though you've spent all this time self-editing, there will still be typos that jump out at you, and mark them somehow and then go back to it. But I love that feeling of knowing that I've worked for so long on this book and it is about to leave my hands, and I'm acting like a reader with this book. I'm the first real reader of this book. And I just find it really, really thrilling. So what happens next? We're almost done, and then we're going to do lots of questions, any questions that you have. This is in 2 channels here, and I hope it's big enough for you to see. But after this book is as good as you can possibly make it, if you're going for traditional publishing and you don't have an agent yet, this is when you send out your query letter. This is when you are ready to send your book to agents, and your book is completely done. You have to have a completed book nowadays for agents, period, unless you are like a Kardashian writing a memoir, then you can sell it on proposal. But otherwise your book needs to be complete and it's ready. You can send out those query letters. Or if you're just not quite sure, and that's down here, if you're just not quite sure if your book is good enough yet, because this is maybe the first time you've done it, it's okay to hire a developmental editor to help you with this book. It will cost money. That's something to consider. But the developmental editor can also go through your book, and you will, the way we learn to write better, there are 3 ways. We read a lot, we write a lot, and we are edited. When we are edited, when our actual work is edited, we learn so much. So that can be really useful to do even before you query. Some people do that and get great results. Let's see. So for self-publishing, if you're going that route, this is when you will hire a developmental editor. I really recommend that you use reedsy.com, reedsy.com. They're a website that freelance editors work through, and all of their freelance editors are vetted, and most of them are from New York traditional publishing. So as we all know, the traditional publishing market has contracted so much in the last 10 years. The big 5 are soon going to be the big 4 because Penguin Random House just bought Simon & Schuster. So now we're going to be down to 4 big traditional New York publishing houses, and they have probably, I'm going to say 500 or 600 imprints underneath those publishers. So there's still a lot of publishers within a publisher to go for. But as traditional publishing has contracted, all of these editors are now making money on their own, working for us. You can work with your favorite writer's editor. You just have to find out who she is and hire her. Reedsy.com has editors. They have cover designers. You can find copy editors. Copy editors and proofers are always going to be a lot cheaper than a developmental editor. A developmental editor, in the confusing way of writers, is also called a content editor or a structural editor. There's probably a couple more words for them. But what a developmental editor is, she is the person who looks at your entire book and makes sure that your story structure is sound and that your pacing is compelling and that your character arcs are complete and resolve to the reader's satisfaction at the end of your book. So that's the big edit, and that's going to be the most expensive. And Reedsy, because they give you, it's for freelance editors. All those editors set their own rates, so I can't tell you how much it'll cost. But what Reedsy can do also is you can select 3 or 4 editors that you like the look of. You look them up, you read their reviews, and then you can send them a sample. What they will do is they will edit that sample and then talk to you about your book and give you a quote. And what you do is you go with the editor you respond to the most. You go with the editor who says things to you that make sense about your writing. The problem is, of course, that you're not really getting a sample of a developmental edit because they're not reading your whole book. They're reading the 5 pages that you sent them. So you're really only seeing them on the page at the sentence level edit, but that's fine. That's enough to get a sense of who they are and what it might be like to work with them. And then, of course, if you're self-publishing, you'll hire a copy editor, a proofer, you'll get your cover made, all of that. And then you celebrate big time. And then if you'd like to, you don't have to, but you write another dang book and then you do it all over again, because we are kind of sick individuals and we can't get enough of this particular punishment. And I know you know what I mean. So that is the fastest overview of revision ever. But what I would, thank you. But what I would like to do now is to open the meeting up for questions. And what I really like to do is answer questions about anything. Yes, we can talk about revision, but I've been in the industry long enough, and I also believe there's not enough transparency in anything we do. So I like to offer myself as a resource that you can ask anything of. If you have any question about any part of writing or publishing that you haven't been able to get answered or you've just been curious about, throw those at me too. So you can raise your hand using, if you know how to do that, or you can just unmute yourself and call stuff out. But let's have a conversation now about anything or everything. Edric, what a great name.
Rachel, do you keep all the various versions of your book as you go along?
Good question. Great question. I'm so glad that you asked that. That's usually something I really bang on about and I forgot to. Yes, I do. And here's how I do it. I'm bad at titles too. And that's typical. If you sell your book to a New York traditional publishing house, they're going to change your title. Out of all my books, I've only ever managed to keep one, because I don't pick the title. My editor doesn't pick the title. The sales and marketing department picks your title, just to see, because they're the ones who decide what will sell the best. So when I'm writing my book, I usually call it the main character's first name. So my book right now that I'm revising is called Quincy, because that's the main character's name. So it's Quincy. Every time I start a new draft, I do a save as, and now I'm working on Quincy draft 2. But not only that, I save every day's, this is going to be a little embarrassing, but I save every day's work as Quincy draft 2, March 8th, 2021. I do that in Scrivener. I use Scrivener myself, but Google Doc works, Word works, Pages works, whatever you do works. But every day I save a new version of it, and then I email it to myself. And I have a time machine backup, and I use Dropbox. But I have seen time and time again the most heartbreaking things. I have seen so many students plan to save their book in multiple formats, and then their laptop was stolen out of their car and they've never emailed it to themselves. It's not in the cloud anywhere. And they lose years worth of work. I didn't even like to lose 10 minutes of work. So I'm constantly saving, and I'm constantly sending myself those different versions. But yes, I basically start over every time with a draft. So Quincy draft 1 will be safe over here in her Scrivener file. Quincy draft 2 looks just like Quincy draft 1 when I start it. And as soon as I start fiddling with it, it completely changes. But I always know that Quincy draft 1 is safe, and I could always go back there and pull things out if I needed to. Does that answer the question?
That's very, very good answer. Thank you. Yes.
Your name, by the way, where is Edric from?
I'm French myself, but it's an English name, Saxon name. The various parts are used in various other names. Eric,
Cedric, or
Edward, etc. The two halves exist in other combinations.
That's beautiful. Edric Kane is such a good name.
Thank you.
Thanks, Edric. Okay, who else? There's nothing too small or embarrassing or weird to ask about anything. Yes, Karen. Oh, but you're not unmuted yet.
Oh, yeah.
Not quite yet.
Did my
You got it.
Now you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Do you sell your books on Amazon then? Are they all on Amazon, or is there any specific publishers that you choose?
All of my books are available on all the vendors. And that's a really interesting kind of intricate question. So when I publish my books through HarperCollins or Penguin Random House, they make sure that the e-versions are available on the 5 major retailers for ebooks, which are Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, Apple Books, and Kobo. Did I say that one already? Oh, Nook. Nook is the other one, Barnes & Noble. So the publisher makes sure they're all available there. The publisher also makes sure that it's available in print everywhere, including to independent bookstores and libraries. And the publisher will generally make sure that there is a audiobook released, hopefully at the same time. When you are self-publishing, the really exciting thing about self-publishing nowadays is that you get to do all of those things too. You can be on every vendor. using either by you uploading your stuff to each vendor by yourself or using a distributor that with one click of a button, they'll send it to all the different vendors. And here's the really cool thing about self-publishing is that a lot of the major publishers now, the New York traditional big four publishers, they'll do a print run, but they'll do a very small print run. And then they'll send that print run out to Barnes and Noble and independent booksellers. And if you're lucky enough to get like Target or Costco, they'll send it out to them. But they don't do a big print run because they are doing a lot of print on demand. And what that means is if you are sitting at home and you go to Amazon and you hit the print book and you say, send it to me, and it's Amazon Prime, and you get it the next day, that book didn't exist until you hit that button. And then a machine in the plant prints out the book. And it looks awesome. It just looks like every other book in the bookstore. In self-publishing now, when you upload a print book, we are using the same machines, literally using the physical same machines in the physical plants to print our books. And when we are self-publishing books, our books should be, this is the goal, should be indistinguishable from anything traditional published. And that includes the cover should be incredibly professional. That your editing has to be top-notch. The book has to be ready. So when I talk about, I'm what's called a hybrid writer, which has nothing to do with hybrid presses. Hybrid presses are a completely different beast, but a hybrid writer does both self-publishing and traditional publishing. I choose when I write romance nowadays, I make way more money by self-publishing it because I get 70% of the cover price if I self-publish it. If I traditionally publish it, I get between 8 and 15% of the cover price. So it's a big difference. And I choose to do that for my romance. But in terms of distribution, like my thrillers and my mainstream stuff, I want those out in the bookstores easily findable. So I give those to my agent for her to sell to editors. But yes, so it was a very long answer, Karen, to your question. I do believe that
that's very full.
best practice, I think, is to be able to be bought at any vendor in the world, if possible. Yeah. Nicole had a question. What is your recommendation for writing the midpoint? What does it need to accomplish? I love this question. Okay, so I like to call it the context shifting midpoint. Your character, your main character or characters, they have an external goal in this book, and it's usually kicked off by that inciting incident, which pushes them into this new world, and they want to accomplish something in this book. Write about the context shifting midpoint, and you will notice this in movies. It'll be right at the 50% mark of the movie if you have to go to the bathroom or get some ice cream. If you read on a Kindle, now that you have heard about the context shifting midpoint, if you haven't heard about it before, you'll say something like, oh my God, this whole book just took a total turn. I didn't see that coming. And then you'll look down at the percentage mark and it'll say 48%, 52%. This is something that you can plan, but good writers also do this really, really naturally. I accidentally did this well in my first book, which it actually happens with a lot of writers with their first book, because we're indoctrinated in the Western hemisphere. We understand the 3-act structure to our very bones, and we automatically put these things in. It's just when we try to repeat them for a second book, we don't know what we're doing. So an example of the context shifting midpoint, what it basically does is it needs to intensify what they desire. They have this external goal. That external goal shifts in some way and gets more intense at a good, strong context shifting midpoint. So let me describe one to you. We have a woman who is maybe kids have just left the nest. She wants to, at the very beginning of the book, we think her goal is to rekindle this relationship with her husband, which has kind of gone cold and flat while the kids were growing up. At the inciting incident, and this is a cliche, forgive me, but she finds lipstick on his collar. Oh my God, he's having an affair. So now her external goal becomes something like, do I stay with him? I've got to figure out what I want with him. He's cheated on me. This is the worst thing ever. A fantastic context shifting midpoint would be if she looks at her sister and realizes that her sister is wearing the shade of lipstick that was on her husband's collar. Suddenly, this book is now not just about a marriage. It is about a familial system and about this woman finding out who she is around people that she couldn't trust, that she thought she could trust. And you see how that just like, it's still the same book, but the wrinkle, it just gets bigger. It gets bigger and worse oftentimes at the context shifting midpoint. Nicole, does that help? I'm gonna guess that it does. And if you need clarification, go ahead and put it in the comments.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Brittany, I'm really enjoying seeing you rock that baby. You're just like right in the middle of my screen, and it's making me really comforted too. What other questions do we have?
Well, this isn't a question, but you ought to know that that baby is the very first Sacramento Suburban Writers Club baby we've had.
Can I see a close-up of this baby, Brittany? Can I get that? Oh my Lord, look at that face.
Oh,
What is his or her name? Brittany, you've got your hands full. I'm asking you to go off mute. You could just like wave at me and say, no, I'm not doing that, Rachel.
Her name is Artemis.
Artemis, are you kidding me? That is gorgeous.
Like the Greek goddess.
Yes, cool.
Oh, look how cute. Oh, she's adorable.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Artemis. Nice to meet you. I've never gone to a writers group that had their very own baby. Thank you, Jeannie. Louis has a question here. How do you handle international books / translations, especially if self-publishing? That's a very good, advanced, difficult question. So if you have an agent and you are traditionally publishing, what they have is a foreign agent. So my agent takes 15% of everything that I make, and I would pay her more because she's amazing and she sells me into places where I would never get otherwise and makes me more money. I'm happy to give her that 15%. I'm also happy to give her 20% when her sub-agent, her foreign agent, sells me to places. She sold that book, Stolen Things, last year's book, to Germany yesterday. So I pay a little bit more because that 15% to an agent is standard, 20% for a foreign sub-rights agent is standard. They need to split that. It's so much harder when you're self-publishing. Here's the easy way to do it, and it's not easy. That's the giveaway. If you are self-publishing and you sell a lot of books, those foreign agents will come to you and will say, your book's doing really well on Amazon. I can see how many you're selling by your rank on Amazon. Would you like me to take this to Bertelsmann in Germany? Would you like me to take this to Poland, to France? But what people are doing nowadays is reaching out to agents, to foreign agents, and proposing themselves, saying, I am self-published. You may not know me yet, but here's my book. This is what it's about. You basically write a query letter to the foreign agent, the foreign sub-rights agent. And then if she manages to sell you to a foreign publisher, they will handle the translation. There are other ways to do this. Right now, I have a book called Fast Draft Your Memoir. It is a semester-long class that I teach at Stanford. And it was read by a German writer, and she loved it, and she does translations. So she wrote to me and said, I want to translate your book. And I paid her to do that. And right now it's in copy edits with a German copy editor. And then I will self-publish it there. The only problem is I don't speak German. I can't figure out if they're doing it right. You know, I have to trust everything. I can't advertise because I couldn't, you know, make an Amazon ad read in German. So it's a grand experiment to see what happens. But there are a lot of particular genres that sell well in different countries. Germany is probably the biggest foreign market right now. Germany with Spain and France coming up pretty closely behind. But romance sells really well in Germany. Science fiction, mystery, thriller sell really well in Germany and Italy. So those are the kind of things you can kind of explore. But my short answer is it's hard for self-publishers, but not impossible. Good question. Laura says, tell us what life is like as a full-time author. That's the dream for a lot of people, right? Is it everything it's cracked up to be? Laura, it is the freaking best. Keep in mind that I worked so much, and you know, I wore a pager to the bathroom, and if 911 rang, I had to run and go support my coworker, right? Mm-hmm. So just being able to make a cup of tea whenever I want to make a cup of tea is fantastic. But the day that I made the leap, the day that I decided to quit, I didn't want to go back to dispatching police, and it was a very weird situation, but my fire agency was taking over a police department and we were going to start dispatching police. So I had an end date and I was already making enough from writing that I thought I could get away with it, but I live in Oakland and it's, it is expensive in Northern California, that. And then my mother-in-law got sick about 4 months before I was going to quit. And I realized, well, I hope we don't have to live under a bridge, but I'm quitting because I want to have the time with her, time to go to Idaho, be with her. And I needed to make, and this is where I like to speak plainly about things like money. I needed to take home $32,000 a year in order to pay my half of the mortgage and keep the roof over our head. But I am really happy to say that I have broken six figures for the last 3 years.
Wow.
So, and I have a podcast. It is called How Do You Write? Very memorable, easy to remember. And on the very first episode of each year, although this year it was the second episode because I was sick, but I talk about what I made the year before and how I made it. So I don't make six figures writing books. Last year, I think I made 40 or 50,000 by writing and selling books. And the rest of the money I write for magazines. I teach a hell of a lot. I teach at Stanford, I teach at Berkeley, I teach my own online courses on revision and 90 days to getting your book done. What else do I do for money? Oh, I have a Patreon where I write an essay a month. And that, I send that out once a month. So I believe that most full-time authors do have to have multiple streams of income. And I like to have as many streams of income as I can because I don't trust companies like Facebook or Amazon. Jeff Bezos is the devil, but he's the devil who pays my phone bill, right? Like he's paying me money for selling these books, but I don't trust him to yank out self-publishing, yank the self-publishing rug out from all of us. So I like to have as many income streams as possible coming in. And Laura, but to answer your question, it's the best. 5 years later, I pinch myself every day. It is the dream job. So thank you for asking that. It's an honor to be able to do this. Okay, Jerry says, at what stage or stages in the revision process are critique groups helpful? Jerry, I always tell the truth and I always tell it kindly. I think critique groups can be very dangerous. I think they can also be very helpful, but you have to be careful. The best critique group, I think, is one that positively encourages you to continue writing, to get this damn book done. And every week you've got to show up with a chapter or 5 pages or whatever it is. But actually people sitting down and telling you how to fix your book, I don't think that's always the best. People get really stuck and frustrated when 3 people tell them 3 different things. And now you're writing a book by committee, trying to please people who might not even be your ideal reader, and they are non-professionals. When you hire a professional developmental editor to give you her best opinion on your book, you can trust that opinion, and you're choosing to trust one person. When you write a book by committee, it can get a little bit dangerous. So I believe that critique groups can always be useful to help you do your work. And if you gel with your group, and you love what Dan says, and you love what Sheila says, and Barb always says something, but that you should ignore her every single time, then I hope that these aren't real names of people in this group because I don't know you. But Jen, your beautiful laughing face just makes me so happy. I like looking at you. Then you can use a critique group wisely, but just keep in mind that they're not professionals. You don't have to do anything that they say. I do have one thing that I think is true though. If 3 different people tell you something doesn't work for them in your book at different times, not 3 people in your critique group where Dan says something and then Barb and Nancy both go, yeah, Dan's right. That doesn't count. If Dan comes to you and then Barb and then Patty, they all come to you and say, I hated it when your character did that. It made me so mad. It didn't make any sense. I wouldn't trust them to tell you how to fix it because it's your book. But they have now pointed out something in your book. I call it the rule of 3. If 3 people say it, it's probably true, and you as the author need to figure out how to fix it. So that can be really useful. So Gloria, on average, how long to write a novel? I try and I teach my students to do this. I really like getting a novel done in 90 days or less, the first draft. And it is terrible, but then you're done and then you get to play with revision. And revision for me, and I'm a full-time writer, but honestly, I think I wrote faster when I was working because, you know, the things we do expand to fill the time allotted. But I generally can revise my books in about the first big make sense draft. I can do in about 90 days also. And then usually a month or 2 to do all the passes and the cleanup and the gorgeousness. So, you know, actually making it a beautiful book. So usually my books are about 6 to 8 months to write from beginning to end. And then, yeah.
Oh, I was trying to get a par there. So does it end up taking a year by the time it goes through the powers and everything?
It takes more if it's a traditionally published book. Yeah, because your editor will get it on her desk, but then she won't read it for a couple of months because she's behind. And then she'll give you, generally to do a big revision from your editor, which is not as big as your big make sense draft, but it'll still be a big revision. They generally give you about 4 to 6 weeks to do that. And then they'll give you 4 weeks to do the copy edits, maybe a couple weeks for the page proofs. So by the time your book hits the shelves, if you're traditionally published, it's generally about 18 months after you've sold the book. So it's a long process, but it gives you a lot of time to do those cleaning up things, which is another nice thing about self-publishing. Self-publishing, you write a book, you make it as good as you can, you get it edited, it's awesome, you publish it, yay, you're making money. Good question. Thank you, Gloria. Yes, Jen says encouragement and goal groups, not critique groups. Yeah, and critique groups can work for some people, but just be very careful because honest to God, if you love this book so much and everyone says it's wonderful, but somebody that you respect in this critique group like quirks their eyebrow wrong, you'll throw the book in the dumpster and never go back to it. Like we're so easily bruised as writers. We're just like really ripe peaches and anything can kill that spirit. So we just have to be careful. What's your point of view on beta readers? Kind of same answer. I have a beta reader and I love her. She is not a writer. She's now my beta reader because she was my biggest fan. She reads every single book I write. It doesn't matter what genre it's in. And she's an excellent reader. So by the time I'm sending my book to my agent, I also send it to Laura Jean. And Laura Jean has no filters. She's the person who says, I hated it when your character did that. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to have that reaction. Sometimes you want your readers to have that reaction. So I have one strong beta reader. Also, sometimes if I'm self-publishing something, I have what's called a review copy team or an advanced readers copy team. And I treat them all as beta readers. Basically, they get the book for free. They read it. I ask them to write an honest review if they would like to by the time they're done. But I also ask them to look for those typos that have slipped past the editor, the copy editor, and the proofer. So now I'm using my beta readers to find weird stuff that has slipped through. And I think those are the cleanest books. If you've got 50 excited people reading it and telling you that you missed one comma here, it's fantastic. You guys have such good questions. I know it's, let's see. Nicole says, what are your tips for finding comps when writing a query letter? All right, this is going to shock you. I don't think that you have to find comps. Uh-oh. Mala? My cat just entered and the cat is named Waylon for a reason because that's all he does. He's just going to wail. Maybe I'll pick him up and then he won't do it. There we go. Okay. So people are told when they're writing query letters to put in comps, but agents know how to do their job. And when they read that very first line in your query letter that says, I'd like to submit for your consideration my speculative fiction novel, Dust, complete at 75,000 words, they've already said, oh, I'm not doing speculative fiction right now. I'm only looking for memoir. And then they don't have to read your query letter, or they'll read your query letter and they'll read your blurb and they know where you fit. They know who to comp you to. Comp titles can be a little bit tricky because if you say this is in the style of Stephen King, they're not going to pay attention because they know you're not that outlier. There's a good chance you're not an outlier like Stephen King. So if you, thank you, Jen, if you would really like to use comps, if you're very married to the idea of using comps, what I recommend is looking at the current market and pulling comp titles that are selling well right now, selling really well right now. And you can tell that by looking at the Amazon rank and selling well for a long time. So you can look at the New York Times list. You don't want to compare yourself to Stephen King or Hunger Games author, whatever. I can't think of her name. But you want to kind of compare yourself to the person 20th on the list. They're selling excellently, and the agents know that they're selling really, really well. And then you sound more like a sane person when you do that. However, I just don't think you need to have comps if you don't want them. Agents, I just skim over them. So if it's stressing you out, just let it go completely. Laura, how much time do we have? Do we go till 9? Just a few more minutes for questions?
Well, yeah, we technically can go till 9.
Okay, but we'll stop if we're out of questions, but I don't want to cut anybody off early.
I mean, really, come on, guys. I brought you like an internationally best-selling author that writes in like 20 different genres and teaches at Stanford.
But it's also like 9 on a Monday and we're all zoomed out. So I understand people are like glazed.
Just saying, if you don't have questions, I'm disappointed in you.
All right, I've got one.
Emily, go ahead.
You mentioned using Scrivener. Can you talk a bit more about that program? I've messed around with it a little bit, but tell people more about what it is, what it can do, what your favorite tricks are.
Actually, you know what? I'm just going to show you Scrivener. Why don't I use that? Let's see what Quincy looks like and see if she's not too embarrassing to look at. It might be embarrassing, but I'm going to do it anyway. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Here's Scrivener. This is what Scrivener looks like. Over here, you have, these are all my scenes. This character owns 100 things and no more than 100 things. So that's kind of at the top for me to be thinking about. And here, right here, bookstore fired, agent fires, lying in memoir about stuff. This, you might recognize, I'm pre-creating my sentence outline. Kimmy, Stephen calls while they're at the pond. Maybe I'm going to remove this. I'm giving myself lots of clues here. So you can move things around really easily. I can move that to there. I can put it inside there. Over in notes, I keep a journal when I'm writing. Every day I kind of think about the project and it gives me a lot of ideas. I can keep my synopsis in here. If I'm working on a synopsis, I can keep my timeline. I keep character ideas, and it's a really good place to hold all of these things. What was I going to say about Scrivener? Oh, the only thing about Scrivener though, and I'll go ahead and stop this because that's a very, very rough draft. That was I'm sweating just showing you that much of it. The thing about Scrivener is once you go into edits, you can't ever go back into Scrivener because the entire industry runs, for good or ill, on Microsoft Word. So it's just industry standard. So when your editor sends you back your manuscript completely edited with its, 4-page revision letter that goes along with it, all of her notes are in Word. And as you are fixing her problems and addressing her comments, if you put it back into Scrivener, it technically can keep those comments, but it doesn't do a good job of it. So we just have to stay in Word forever. So Scrivener is wonderful for the first draft, the second draft, the third draft, and all of those passes. But after that, you'll be in Word forever. Scrivener also has a lot of bells and whistles. I barely know how to use any of them. It's just good enough to know how to put your work in and move the scenes around. You don't have to use all of the bells and whistles. Emily, do you use it yourself?
I do a little bit, but same thing. I don't use most of the extra fun bonus features. It's
yeah,
just being able to see like, okay, what's actually going on? Should this go up here?
And color coding is really nice. When I'm doing drafts, I'll change each scene to a color after I've actually hit it past it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you outline, the question is, so you outline the entire story before you start? I don't. You're looking at a full first draft that is a total mess, and it looks like an outline is there, but that's just because after I write a scene, I put the bullet point notes over there of what happened in the scene. But I know that half of those scenes are going to move, be really, really changed. I would love to be a better plotter, but I am really a pantser. I fly by the seat of my pants. I generally know what the book is kind of about. I know the inciting incident, and I know the context shifting midpoint, and I sometimes know the dark moment. I never know how to fix it, and I don't know anything that comes in between those points. So I just kind of write along the way. And like you say, do your characters sometimes take control of the book? The characters take control of the book all the time in really irritating ways. But I just keep showing up, and the nice thing is, and a lot of you already know this, that after you've been writing a while, you just get to trust your process. You just get to trust that, yeah, it sucks now, and I will be able to make it into something really fabulous. Nicole says, Wavemaker is an add-in I've heard works in Word or Google Docs and is similar to Scrivener. For those who are curious, it's free. I'm going to look into that then, Wavemaker. Thank you for that. I'll check that out.
Also about Scrivener, I had heard, I think it was actually the guy or the person who actually developed it, commenting that it was important to understand that Scrivener is not intended to be an editor. It's an organizational tool, and it gives you that ability to, like you were saying, save everything
and I actually
organize it.
Yeah, I even use it for my classes because I can save each week's class as this. You can pull in videos and pictures, and you can attach, your character images in there, the websites that you want to go back to. It's really useful for that. Yeah, good point. Any last minute questions? If you put your email into I'll drop the link again. I use my, there it is. If you want to give me your email, because I don't think I caught, there were some in the chat, but I don't know where they went. Go ahead and put your email in there. I will send you the PDF probably tomorrow of the slides. It does put you on my writer's list, my writer's email list. But if you don't want to be on my writer's email list, just unsubscribe immediately and after you get the PDF, and I will not be offended at all. That's just how I deliver it. Julie, did you have a question?
No, I just had a comment when you were talking about translating German and all that. If these are people you trust, it's not a problem. All the years I spent working in the social services industry, we had to translate all kinds of stuff. But again, we were working on shorter things. We worked on things that were really culturally sensitive. We did something that what was called transadapting. We had to transadapt it to make sure that when it translated, we weren't offending. Did not translate well, especially my cat's helping. Did not translate well, especially in short, like public service announcements and things like that. And then for longer things, what we did is we did what's called back translating. It's where you took the translated piece and you handed it to somebody else who spoke the language, who then converted it back to English.
So it's like a double translation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was but again, we were working with much smaller things than books.
It makes me really nervous. I've had friends who had books translated and they have to take them down. They spend thousands on getting them translated and the complaints are too many, and that's just what happens. So it is this gamble. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially if you have regional dialect issues.
Which Germany does have. Yeah.
You probably just you might have to pick, okay, which are we,
Exactly.
If you want a really good basic translator, Deeple.com.
Yes.
I had to do some serious translations for my son into French, and I did exactly the same thing that Julie's talking about. I retranslated them using Google Translate back into English to make sure they were saying exactly the same thing, and it worked. And I speak French, but I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't, that there were no errors in it.
So what Alita's talking about is the Deep L AI program, and it's just the word deep and then the letter L. And that's actually what I did for the German translation of Fast Draft Your Memoir, because Germany has the stipulation that if somebody translates your book, now they own copyright on it, and you have to share your royalties on anything that you sell, 50-50, or it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I didn't want that. So I used DeepL to translate it. And then this woman who loved the book, she cleaned it up. So she's not the translator, she's more of an editor. And then I went to the copy editor. So that's a really good way to do it, Alita. That's a really good point. You guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. Jerry has a question, and then we'll probably have to wrap it up.
Do you use a software editor on your Word drafts?
Yes, I really like Pro Writing Aid. I do not like Grammarly as much. I've used both, but Pro Writing Aid is something that I use at a very basic level. As soon as you let it take over your document, it will strip every ounce of personality out of your writing. Don't believe everything it says. But to tell you that you're missing words, that you've spelled something wrong, or that this particular sentence is way too much in the passive voice, it's really useful. And I think you can buy like a lifetime subscription, which I prefer to paying $15 every month. I really can't stand all those things. So Pro Writing Aid is one I recommend. Yeah. Laura and Ron and everyone, thank you so much for having me. It has been a joy. Yeah, I'll send you the PDF if you'd like to, and respond back. Keep in contact with me. Tell me how you're doing. I believe in community in writers, so now you got me in your community too.
Can you give us just a tiny short plug about your upcoming book, because I don't know anything about it?
Oh, so Hush Little Baby is a woman who she's a OBGYN who has never had a child, who is pregnant, and is somebody else wants her baby.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a little scary. It's one of those. The one that I'm writing right now, though, I will tell you, the Quincy book is the log line is Marie Kondo wants her stuff back. So I'm not writing about Marie Kondo, but it's a Marie Kondo-like person who wants her stuff back. So that's very different and fun and light. But yeah, the Hush Little Baby will be out in a couple months, and I hope you like it. Thanks,
Thank you, Ray.
everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
So make me back the
Yes, you've got host. You've got host now.
Yeah, put me back to host. Also, can we record these? Can I publish it on YouTube? This meeting. Do I have your permission?
Absolutely, have my permission. If no one else minds, yeah,
Thank you.
Totally. Will you send me that link too? Because I'll send it out to other people too.
Okay, sure,
That'd be great.
sure.
Also, if you like speaking, I know on your website it says that you do book groups and book clubs and stuff like that, but I don't think I ever found anything about like I'm available for speaking engagements on your website, unless it's like buried in there. So
I don't think I've ever put that on there, and I should, because I really do like speaking. Obviously, I can speak a lot of words in a minute, perhaps too many. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. I'm waving my Post-its at you. Post-it land. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
good night, everybody.
Night,
See you
everybody.
Great meeting.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Ron, send me the links too for the different meetings we've had.
Okay.
I can get them in the newsletter.
Oh, that's a good idea. We could put them in the newsletter.
Yeah, along with the subject or the speaker, or whatever. So a quick clue and hint.
Okay. Sounds
Okay. All right. Good night.
good. Night.